So thanks everybody for joining us today. We are here to talk about the fun idea of how to buy a vacation house for free. And this concept came to me because it was something I was able to accomplish with my husband and for my family. And I thought I really want to share this idea with as many people as possible because it is possible. And I think given the type of economy that we have right now, where so many people are sitting on a lot of equity, that this is really something that's possible for them if we just walk them through some basic steps. So today should be a lot of fun. We're going to do some imagination stuff, imagining what might be good for you or your family, what you might be able to do with the equity that you're sitting on in your current house. And then we're going to sprinkle in a little bit of math. So whether you are right-brained or left-brained, I think everybody should leave feeling pretty happy today. So one thing I just want everybody to keep in mind is that this is going to be super high level discussions, right? We don't know your exact housing situation. We can't quite imagine what everybody might want to invest in if they could wave a magic wand. And so we highly encourage you to reach out to us after the class to run some scenarios for you. So what types of properties are you interested in and what sections of the state? And then also how do you tap into your equity, or how do you potentially fund this particular property? But I guess before I go too far, I'll just introduce us. So my name is Rachel Farley. I run the RachNH Realty Group at Keller Williams. And we have a great little real estate team here focusing on the entire state of New Hampshire, as well as sections of Massachusetts and Maine. I brought with me Matt Murray from Apex Lending. So Matt, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you all for coming and being here today with us again. As Rachel said, my name is Matt Murray. I'm the owner here at Apex Mortgage Lending, and excited to kind of share some of these ideas of how we can make it simple to tap into some of the current equity that you might have at a primary residence and use that to either purchase of a vacation, second home, and/or investment property. So, looking forward to reviewing all that here with you guys.
Awesome. So we'll put our contact information, our emails in the chat box in case you want to grab them. But just a couple things to keep in mind for this class. We're recording it, so we're going to send it back out to everybody afterwards, whether you want to watch it again for your own knowledge or share it with a friend or family member. So that will be recorded. We'll be sending it out to everybody who signed up for the class. And then go ahead and save your questions for the end. You can throw them in the chat box as you go, but we might cover that question as we go through the class. So we'll just save a little Q&A time at the end, make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. What are we going to be talking about today? We are going to think about what types of homes you might want to invest in, whether it's a second home or an investment property, examples of how you can finance the home, but then how do you fund it? And then funding it is really two things. It's how do you come up with the down payment, and then how do you keep funding it month after month after month? So how do you fund the mortgage going forward? So we're going to tackle these three topics in the next hour. All right, so here's the fun part. Here's the imagination. What do you get to spend your money on, right? So you have your home that you currently live in, and you are, through time and effort, you were able to create a lot of equity in the home. So maybe you want a cabin up in the North Country that you can sneak away to and just get away from the noise of, the busier parts of the state. Maybe you're dying for a lake house to create some memories with the kiddos. Or maybe you just really want to grow your real estate portfolio. You've been dying to get into investment properties, and this could be a way to do that. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about. I'm going to hand it over to Matt, though, just to give us some high-level idea of the different types of financing that we might use in order to get there.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you. So so today what we want to do is, the primary objective goal is, as Rachel said, the funding of purchase of the second home or vacation home and or investment property. So using one simple tool. Now there are other options. We're talking about the home equity line of credit here as our tool for funding as the down payment. And we'll go over some more in depth of why we want to use that. And then, again, what is the difference between financing a second home versus financing an investment property? So what are the down payment options between the two, and how do we qualify for each? So we're going to go through these three different scenarios here later on down the presentation.
Great. Perfect. All right. So let's look at this cute little cabin. So this is an actual house that sold in New Hampshire this year. The address was 196 Percy Drive in Stratford, New Hampshire, which is up by Berlin. This sold just last month, so September of 2023. It was listed for $119,900, and it was on the market for 39 days before the seller took an offer of $115,000. So some cool parts about this property is it's just under 5 acres. It abuts snowmobiling trails, and it's a great little hunting cabin, or just a nice refuge if you're looking to get out of town. So Matt, why don't you tell us how we could use second home financing to make this property come to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a perfect example, right, of a less expensive home to get into as a second home or vacation home. And as I was talking in the last slide, what is the difference? What makes this from an investment or from a financing perspective? What defines this really as a second home? And the easiest way to think about it is what your intended use is going to be. So in what we call in the mortgage world, the occupancy. So if your intended use for this is I want to enjoy it for my family and myself, maybe I'm going to go hunting or whatnot, then we can categorize this as a second home. And what's that benefit of financing a second home is it allows for a much less of a down payment. So on a second or vacation home, we can put as minimum down of 10%. So as you can see in this scenario, a home that sold for $115,000, our down payment needed to buy this is only $11,500. So, a lot more affordable to maybe, get into something along these lines if this is your, one of your dreams or goals or aspirations for what you consider a second or vacation home. So a lot less expensive to purchase this house using secondary financing moving forward.
So one thing you pointed out to me earlier was how you have to qualify with both your current home and this home. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, perfect. So really, one of the bigger differentiators of second home, vacation home financing versus investment property. So the benefit of allowing us to call it a second home, again, we can put much less down as far as the down payment. The trade-off there is any potential income that we may make from this home. So just because it's a second or vacation home doesn't mean you can't rent it later down the road. You actually can, but we cannot use the rental income that you potentially can make on a second home to help you qualify. So we have to be able to obviously qualify with whatever current mortgage payment that you're making on your current home with the second home payment or the potential of the second home payment with the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
Perfect. So even though the rate seems scary, right? Because we're just coming out of the most historically low interest rates in the history of our country, the rate seems high at 8.65. But what does that do for your payment? So your principal and interest, $805, your taxes are $110 per month, your insurance roughly $75. So let's just say you own this home for $995 per month, and you can expect a rental rate in the Berlin area at $189 a night, and it will be occupied or rented from you 43% of the time. That's going to generate about $2,500 a month in gross rents. Now, of course, some seasons are going to be busier and some are quieter, but overall, this is what it's going to average out to. So you're going to cash flow $1,524 a month. Doesn't mean you get to put all of that in your pocket. You're going to have electricity, you're going to have maintenance. If you're renting it for really short term, you're going to have cleaning fees and things like that. But generally speaking, your entire investment will definitely be covered, and you should have more than enough to do all those operating costs that go along with it, with its generating cash flow of $1,500 a month. So again, with $11,500, you might already have that saved. Of course, you're going to need a little extra for closing costs, but again, it's very low cost entry into this type of property that, number one, you get to use. You get to go up there as much as you want and then turn on rentals for any time that you're not up there. And so the idea that this thing is going to cash flow and it's going to pay down your mortgage every month, it's going to create wealth for your family. And oh, by the way, historically, homes gain 4% of value year over year. So you're kind of double dipping on winning as far as that investment goes. You're paying down your mortgage with rental income. The home is appreciating in value, and none of this is coming out of your pocket except for the initial down payment. So this is a great opportunity to get into a property for low cost. Now, we haven't hit the big money yet, but you might be thinking, well, Rachel, like, what is the overall market right now? Does it even make sense to invest? And so just like a very high level overview of what's going on in the New Hampshire real estate market is days on market is less than 30 days across the entire state. We're still getting multiple offers on many, many properties, and the interest rates don't seem to be slowing down buyers. So where we still have a supply and demand problem, it doesn't look like the prices will be softening in New Hampshire anytime soon. Things are just very strong. The rental market is very strong. The cost of renting is very high, and therefore people are looking toward home ownership to solve their rental problems. And so this is just like some historical information about housing in the United States. And so this is this green line here is the 4% market trend. So the national average is homes appreciate 4% year over year. Now, of course, we had the dip in 2009, 2010, and it, struggled its way back up in the last 3 years. When COVID happened, we kind of bounced above that. Now it already started leveling off this year. And again, this is national. This isn't New Hampshire as a whole. Our average sale price is in the 400s, and our days on market isn't slipping. And I think that for the foreseeable future, the demand is going to stay very strong. Part of that is due to our tax system, no income tax, no sales tax, and therefore it's very desirable to live here. So one other thing for you to think about is there's no crystal ball that the rates will go down. So everyone might be waiting for the rates to go down, but frankly, if the rates go down, that's just going to drive more buyers into the market and the prices are going to go higher. So being able to step into a property when rates are here and things are somewhat stabilized, you're probably better off to get a price that you would be happy with. And if you're lucky enough that rates go down, you grab a lower interest rate along the way, and that improves your cash flow. But now you weren't in a bidding war. You didn't overpay for a house. And so just keeping that in mind. And then the flip side of that coin is if rates continue to go up, you're the genius who just jumped in when you jumped in, so you didn't end up paying a higher interest rate because they kept going up. Okay, that was the math portion for all you math folks. But now let's go back to the fun stuff. Let's look at a lake house. All right, so this particular property also sold this year. It was 13 Utah Way in Milton, New Hampshire. It sold in March of this year, hence all the snow on the ground. So it listed at $710,000. 3 days later, they took an offer of $735,000, so 25 over list price. It's under 1/4 of an acre. It has 2,200 square feet, 3 beds, 3 baths. It's lakefront on Milton Three Ponds. And this is going to be another example of a second home. So I'm going to let Matt talk about the financing piece of that. And we'll just talk about shortly after, how do we go from, okay, that was one thing to put down $11,000. How do we end up getting to these bigger chunks of money? So Matt, why don't you just talk about second home financing on this property?
Yeah, perfect. So the previous slide, we had a cabin, 115,000. So obviously the barrier of entry to buy a second home on that much lower. $115,000 purchase price, $11,500 from a 10% down perspective. As far as your down payment's concerned. Now we get into the other category, if you will. The lake house. With New Hampshire being lakes, mountains, obviously a lot of sought after lakefront property. But now we're talking a $735,000 purchase price. But again, this could still fall into a second home category as far as occupancy. So your down payment again can be a minimum of 10%. So obviously, easy, simple math here, 73,500 is our down payment. And again, we have your principal, interest, your taxes, insurance here listed on the slide and showing the cash flow. So again, yes, much higher of a purchase price, but you can see something even along these lines, not terrible to say, hey, it's not that bad to purchase a second home, 70 or what I need to purchase a second home, 73,500. Another keynote too, we talked about, Rachel was talking about the interest rates. So just one thing to think about too, when they're talking about secondary financing with traditional financing, a second home and a vacation home does carry a higher interest rate than say a primary residence. So an easy way to think about the interest rates when moving forward is typically it's about 0.5% to 1% higher on a second home to an investment property than what purchasing a primary residence. The real simple reason is there's more risk involved with a second slash investment property that goes into it. So carries a higher interest rate.
Yeah, great. Good point there. So this particular area of the state, Milton, New Hampshire, rents at $388 a night. It's occupied 63% of the time. So that's that's cyclical. You're going to be busier in the summer, maybe quieter in the winter, but it's going to average out to that $7,500 a month in gross rent. That's going to cash flow you about $1,400. Now, does that mean you get to put all that $1,400 in your pocket? Probably not. You have to heat it. You have to have electricity. You're probably going to have internet. And then if you have a lot of turnover, you're probably going to also be paying for cleaning fees. And so some of that can be worked into the short-term rental, but some of that, you have to expect that $1,400 in cash flow is going to be just your operating maintenance of the property. Now, if you get to own an appreciating asset, renters are paying down your mortgage, and then you get to use a lake house for a few weeks out of the summer. And even if it costs you nothing, right? Even if that $1,400 is completely eaten up by your operating costs, it's still a major victory. You have a vacation destination, you have an appreciating asset, and somebody's paying into a savings account for you every month. And therefore, when you look at it in those terms, it's worth considering this as an option to accomplish both something really great for you or your family, as well as something really great for creating wealth for you and your family. So that's what I love about this whole concept, and that I really wanted to bring it out to people. So the last scenario we're going to look at is a good old-fashioned four-family in Manchester. Now, I say that with a smirk on my face, but honestly, I've been a landlord for 20 years in Manchester. It is a great option. There's pros and cons to it. I'm not going to lie about that, but it's a moneymaker. And if you've been in it or plan to stay in it for a while, you're going to reap the benefits. So this particular property is a 4-unit, sold in May of this year. They listed and sold it for $662,500. It was 0 days on market. So what does that mean? Is the agent captured the data inside of MLS, but they probably connected the buyer and the seller themselves and just put it into the system for tracking purposes. So this is 4 2-bedroom units. Some of the perks are that it's in central Manchester and very easy to rent. Why do I say easy to rent? Because the vacancy rate is less than 1%. So that means you'll have less than 3 days per year that place could possibly be empty. And frankly, if you create a nice place for people to live, they're probably not going to want to leave. That's the bottom line. This is a different scenario, Matt. So they're going to need some more money, and the financing qualification is different. So why don't you talk about that?
Perfect. Yeah. So, so prime difference here, investment property versus the vacation home. So again, we talked about what makes that difference or makes up the difference in financing versus second vacation investment. And again, the number one thing to think of is occupancy, intended use, right? So vacation home up at the lake, we can sell that as a second home. Up in, Berlin, the cabin, in the woods, we can sell that to underwriting. It's a second home. downtown Manchester, we doubt you're going to go on vacation to downtown Manchester, right? So this would, obviously fall into the category investment property. And the trade-off, again, what we talked about with the difference between second and vacation versus investment, is an investment property is carrying now a lot more of a down payment. So your minimum down payment on a multi-family or a multi-unit home is 25% down. Now, but the flip side for qualification, the trade-off is now we can use the rental income that you're potentially going to make on the home and add that to your current scenario in earned income to help you qualify to purchase the house. So in this example, we're showing $7,200 in gross rents that we can use to add to your scenario here to help you qualify. So a lot of people might say, hey, there's no way I can buy another $662,000 home. Well, if you're going to use it for an investment and you're going to make money on it, you might be able to, because we can add that the income from the 4 units you're going to be cash flowing on to your current scenario.
Yeah. So this, I mean, again, even this nearly 9% interest rate, your monthly mortgage payment, taxes and insurance is $4,600 a month, but you're going to be collecting $7,200 in rent. And that is pretty darn reliable. And we'll get into more about the statistics and how I got to $1,800 a month per unit. But that's going to keep $2,600 in your pocket after you paid for your mortgage, taxes, and insurance every month. Now, you're going to have a water and sewer bill that has to be paid by a landlord. You're going to have maintenance that needs to be done and potentially renovations if and when tenants move out. The bottom line is they just don't leave it as nice as you gave it to them. And so you do need to continually reinvest. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find $2,600 a month in expenses and operating expenses to run this type of property. So this one, I'm feeling very confident that there's built-in profit every single month. But Matt, the last 2 scenarios we talked about are far more expensive, right? So with 10% down or 25% down, not everybody has this money just laying around in their bank account. So can we talk a little bit about how to use a home equity line to accomplish that down payment?
Perfect. Yep. So again, back to the primary objective here was using some of the tools that you have and programs that you have to tap into say the equity in your primary residence. And now there's a couple different ways. You have what's called a cash out refinance, where you can use that, which has got more of a 30-year fixed rate attached to it. But the home equity line of credit, the HELOC, the reason this is one of the number 1 tools is the flexibility. So the first and foremost, we talked about interest rates, right? So obviously the interest rate environment today is a lot higher than, say, maybe the house that you currently live in when you bought it. You might be sitting on a nice, pretty 3% or even lower, 2.75% interest rate. So the HELOC doesn't affect that rate, right? It's a second mortgage. So that's going to carry its own rate, and we don't have to touch or do anything with that primary residence, that primary loan that you have on it now. So that's number 1. Number 2 is a flexibility as far as getting the money out of your house. So number 1, it's quick and easy. So it only takes about 2 weeks to basically obtain the money. Number 2 is the way we can use it. It's used as a line of credit. So we're going to use a slide here as our example. So let's just say we take a typical house that's worth $600,000. Maybe you bought it, like you said here on the slide, in 2018 for $300,000. We're assuming maybe you have a current balance still on your primary mortgage for $225,000. So how much can I take? Well, you can go all the way up to what we call a 90 loan to value, or you can still leave 10% equity position. The example here on the screen is actually still leaving a 20% equity position in the current home. So that means you can tap into $255,000 of equity. Now, again, where the flexibility comes in the home equity line, and in this scenario, I'm using this as a great tool to purchase a second home or vacation home and/or investment property, is we can go ahead and get the line of credit for $255,000, but it doesn't mean you have to use it all. So maybe it is the cabin in the woods that you want. So you're only going to use $11,500, and your payment on the home equity line of credit is only going to be based off of what you are drawing off of it. So you take the $255,000, you set it aside. You have that as a tool for whatever, you basically can use the money for whatever you want. You don't have to purchase a home, but in this scenario, and obviously the purpose of this presentation, maybe you want to buy a second home, maybe you want to buy more than one home. You have this equity that you can tap into multiple times, and you're only going to make payments on what you're using. So typical setup is, and again, the reason why it's flexible and a great tool, the first 10 years is interest only. I mean, now, of course, you can pay down the principal, so there's no prepayment penalty on a HELOC or anything along those lines. But the first 10 years, only interest that you have to worry about. So again, getting into these homes, maybe it's an investment property that you want to start cash flowing. It gives you a very flexible option that's not breaking the bank to grab some cash out and have an interest only payment for the first couple of years. When you start cash flowing, then you can start paying that off and increasing back or the balance of the home equity line, returning that, paying the principal off. So again, the flexibility of the tool as far as the payment's concerned, and again, just the way you can use and utilize it, quick and easy method. Also, you may not even need an appraisal on your current property to go ahead and get the HELOC. So we have an easy way to find out, like, hey, do I even need an appraisal on my current home to see if I can qualify or my house will qualify and how much equity I have. And what that does for you is it's just less of closing costs on the home equity line loan, because it is a loan, obviously carries some cost to close the loan, but it's just less expensive for you as well. So overall, using this tool in the manner that we're presenting today is just fantastic and phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think that this slide in particular kind of highlights what we started at the beginning of the class, which is just your scenario is going to be so detailed to you and your exact scenario of what you have going on. So we encourage you to reach out to us after. We'll put, I think Matt has an application link. We'll put that in there as well. That's the easiest way to get rolling with him. But we together can kind of in tandem help create a scenario of what you're trying to accomplish. So, a multifamily might be the absolute opposite reason that you came to this call and you love the idea of a lake. Well, great. What I'm going to point out to you is that there's way more than 2 or 3 lakes in the state of New Hampshire. There's so many lakes and ponds that you can do boating, and depending on what you're trying to accomplish, where do we want to kind of put you or find the right investment property for you? And then we can flip it over to Matt and say, hey, Matt, like, what's the best way we can finance this? Here's the scenario on my current house, so that he can run the numbers and tell you what's going to be the best way to finance it going forward. So then we're going to jump into, okay, so that's like really tapping into that imagination piece of how do we make this happen and how do we get a vacation home out of it. But some of you might still have more of like the investor side or that investor hat on. So Matt, could you tell us a little bit about this non-traditional way of financing investment properties?
Yeah, absolutely. So far we've, as Rachel just said, we've talked about everything we've talked about is more traditional financing, right? So the second home, vacation home, that's using a traditional conventional loan, with the minimum down payments. Same with the investment property. So how do we obtain an investment property using a traditional conventional mortgage? And the reason we want to kind of point this out is that's really more black and white on qualification, right? It's going to follow the standard qualifications for a conventional loan. Your debt to income ratios need to be a certain amount. You got to have to carry obviously a certain credit score. You got your down payment options. It's all well and good, but not everybody's going to fall into that mold or into these scenarios. So there are other options to get into the investment game that maybe I don't have the greatest income, but I still want to try to, be a business owner or a property owner. Or maybe I do have the money saved and I already own a couple investment properties that, I have some money tied up into, and they're not cash flowing as much at the moment because I've put in some cash into fix them up or whatever the case may be. So you might not fall into these traditional molds. So one of the main tools that allows you to buy still is what we call a DSCR loan, called debt service coverage ratio loan. And what this really does from a high level overview is it allows you to take whatever the principal, interest, taxes, insurance on that investment property and the potential gross profit, basically creating a ratio. If that ratio is high enough, you can just use the rental income to help you buy these houses. So in doing so, they have, again, some more flexible, it's different options. There's a couple different options using these loans with down payment options. And you can be a first-time investor. So maybe you don't have any experience, running an investment property. You still can use one of these loans to purchase a property. Now, per the slide here, because there's more risk involved, we're not using the traditional method to obtain an investment property. Does carry a higher interest rate on these type of loans. So I think the average right now is about 11.5%. But still, if you go back to our couple of slides, whether it's 11.5, 8.625, hopefully the rates will come down here in the near future. It's going to allow more cash flow. But even at 11.5%, getting into a property and obtaining a property, it's paying for itself. And there's still, depending on what you're buying, huge potential for cash flow, even at these higher interest rates that are out there in the market today. So just another option. Again, we can dive a lot more into this particular loan. We could go 2 hours just on these particular loans. So, but just another option out there that if you don't fall into that traditional mold for conventional financing, there are other options to do so.
So one question that came to mind for me is if they're kind of non-traditional in this type of mortgage, is there some sort of minimum credit score that they're going to need to get this type of mortgage?
Yeah, so good question. So, typical financing, you have these floors, and as far as you need to have a certain credit score to qualify. So a conventional mortgage, we're talking about traditional way, your minimum credit score is typically a 620. So don't have to have like this high credit score to really start doing this, right? Not everybody's perfect with their credit. So now, unfortunately, with a DSCR loan, or in this typical example, it's because there's more risk involved. And again, it's a different program. These do carry higher credit scores, but still not terrible. Depending on how you fall into the scenario, what category you fall, you think anywhere between 680 and a 720 is going to be the minimum credit score for something along these lines.
Which makes sense, right? So a lender is going to want to make sure you have good credit because they're kind of taking more risk on by going just by the rent roll.
Correct.
Yeah, great. All right. So one of the things that we were talking about was what can you expect for rental rates, whether it's for the cabin, for the lake house, or even for the traditional like 2-bedroom long-term rental. And so where did I get some of this data to fill out these scenarios? There's a great tool called AirDNA. It's its own website. And you can put in any market that you're interested in. And so if I'm going to look at the Milton market, that was the lake house that we talked about, this is where I got that $388 per month and the 63% occupancy rate. And so that is just like great basic information if I'm thinking about a certain area. And the same thing too, when I looked at the Berlin area, $189 a month with a 43% occupancy rate. Looks like the busiest months are obviously, May, June, July, August, a little into September. And so this just gives you some basic information to say, okay, what I'm trying to accomplish, is this even going to be possible with the averages in the area? Now, if you're picking something that's super above average, you're going to want to take that into account. But just with the averages, does it make sense even pursuing this a little further? I also pulled up Meredith because I think a lot of people have aspirations of being up on Lake Winnipesaukee. And then you can see right here that the rates are $560 a night with a 57% occupancy rate. And they just have so many rentals up there. It doesn't surprise me that there's a fair amount of vacancy. But you can see such a big difference at $560 a night to $380, Winnipesaukee versus Milton Three Ponds. So this is a great tool. Certainly I have access to it if you wanted to look at a scenario with me, but if you were thinking about becoming like a pretty serious investor, this would be a great tool to invest in, so you could kind of feel out different areas to determine if you wanted to invest in them. And frankly, this screenshot that I'm sharing with you is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more data that's available to you to decide if that's going to be a good investment for you. So this is the funding piece, right? So part of the funding piece was, how do we come up with the down payment? If it's a small enough property, maybe you have it in savings. But if it's a more expensive property, we talked about tapping into that home equity line of credit. But now we're talking about funding it. So now we know with AirDNA about how much you can rent a property per night and how often it will be rented. So that's going to give us an idea of our cash flow. But then how do you push it out into the market? How do you let everybody know that your place is available? So with short-term rentals, there's a few different options. There's Airbnb, VRBO, TripAdvisor, and Booking.com. And they have a couple of different ways to slice it and dice it. But if I could just direct you to this line here of total fees, this is just one scenario. If you were to generate $28,000 a year in rental fees, $28,000 in the total bookings, that these would be your fees depending on which service you use for them. I only point that out is because there is a monetary aspect to doing the short-term rentals. You're going to have to pay some fees to use these services to push your listing out there, but there's other things to take into account. So I would say Airbnb and VRBO are the most popular options. Airbnb has more users, but they cater to a younger crowd and also people who might be just looking for a room or shared spaces, where VRBO only rents the entire home, the entire property. And oftentimes it more caters to families and a little bit longer term bookings. So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for just fast and as full as possible and you don't care who's getting in there, then maybe Airbnb is your option. Or maybe you start with something like VRBO because you like the concept of it's going to be more families, maybe longer term stays. So that way you're feeling a little bit more comfortable treading in. Matt brought up a great question as we were talking about this class is, well, can you put them on both, or can you put them on everything? And the short answer is yes, you can. And so these aren't flat fees. These aren't just like their fee to join their membership. This is based on how much rental income you're going to generate with them. And so these would go down if you're splitting them amongst multiple platforms. The difference is if you rent something on Airbnb, you're going to need to make sure you go over to the other platform and mark it as booked, so you don't have two different groups booking for the same days. And so there's just a little bit more clerical work if you're going to be having things on multiple platforms. So one of the last topics to go over is just the general long-term rental. So the investment property style investment. And New Hampshire Housing does a great job every year. They do an annual survey to as many property owners as they can get in touch with. And what they've determined for 2023 is that the vacancy rate is less than 1%. So for all 2 bedrooms across the entire state of New Hampshire, the vacancy is less than 1%. So that means pretty much the day somebody else moves out, your new tenant would be ready to move in. There's that much demand for housing in New Hampshire that your vacancy rate is essentially 0. I would say that this even registers because they have to take into account that sometimes you need to take a month off between tenants to do renovations. Now, they also determine that the gross rent for a 2-bedroom throughout the whole state, so kind of the average of the whole state, is just under $1,800. So when you come further south, you're definitely going to be pushing $1,800, $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom rental. What's great is this comes out every year. We'll put that link to this study. It's a great just PDF. It's sliced and diced a million different ways. It breaks out room counts and counties and all sorts of things. So you can just determine again, like, do I want to buy this mega property up in Claremont? Okay, what's the rental rate going to be there? What can I expect for vacancy? And so it really deep dives into different regions of the state. One thing that you might want to consider that we haven't talked about yet is if investment properties are kind of on your radar, a management fee is 10%. And that can handle a lot of things. It takes the headache out of being a property owner. So they're going to manage repair requests. contractors collecting rent, monthly and quarterly reports, so you can see how your cash flow is going. They can also potentially find tenants for you. And so with that 10% of the overall rents, that's their fee for managing your property throughout the year. How do long-term rentals find tenants? 2 ways. Number one, they can hire a real estate agent like myself. We show the property, we screen the tenants, we give you recommendations, and then you decide who you'd like to move forward with. The other way is many people just manage them themselves. And they do that by posting on places like Marketplace and Craigslist and, just finding tenants the good old fashioned way. So, there's a lot of different ways to find tenants for the property, whether you want to manage it yourself or you don't want to manage it yourself. And then there's kind of some hybrids in the middle of how to be involved, but not manage every single aspect of it. So the overall last concept that Matt and I wanted to go over with you is this concept of marry the house, but date the rate. We can't control the interest rates. What we can see is what's going on with prices, and then you can determine what your price is and lock that in. But the rate is variable. So make sure that you're buying the investment property, whether it's this long-term rental, short-term rental, vacation home, second home concept, the house that's really great for you. Is it close by? Can you manage it very easily? Is it going to have, great appeal and tenants are going to really want to stay in that property? Find a home that really speaks to you or meets the needs that you're trying to accomplish. And then if it cash flows, then you date the rate. And again, like I mentioned before, if you get in and this is the lowest the rates are going to be for a while, you're a genius. All your friends said, oh my God, we were on the sidelines. We were waiting for rates to drop. But you were like, no, this made sense. It cash flowed. I was ready to do it. And I took the opportunity versus waiting until rates go down. And then kind of that feeding frenzy bidding war with all the other buyers starts ramping up again. Instead, once you've locked in the price for the property that you really like, you're able to grab a lower interest rate if it comes around. And, we're here to help with both aspects of that. So we're kind of coming to a close here. I'll let you start thinking about your questions. Matt, is there anything as we were kind of wrapping up all the data that we pulled together? Is there anything that came to mind that you wanted to share with the group?
No. I mean, I think we kind of touched about, kind of the basics and high level overview on everything. Again, just talking about the rates, I mean, if you're going into this as looking at cash flowing, even where the interest rate is, it's still a great option as far as buying a house is concerned. So, but I think you hit pretty much everything very well.
Great. So we'll give some folks some time. You can certainly put some messages in the chat. And I guess I'll just share one other scenario that really is the reason that inspired me to teach the classes. I mentioned off the top is that we were able to do this for our family, and it's been working great. We didn't pick a house up at Lake Winnipesaukee. We live in southern New Hampshire, and we wanted a place for our kids to boat and kayak and have some summer memories for us. But we are a busy family with a bunch of kids, and the idea of heading north every weekend and sitting in an hour plus of traffic was not appealing to us. So we found a house on a pond that allows for boating, and that allowed us to get into an awesome house 20 minutes from us, door to door, and we can use it all summer. We talked about, maybe you use an investment property for a couple weeks a year, but potentially if you buy it right, you can use it for the whole summer and rent it out the rest of the year. And so because the property we purchased is in southern New Hampshire, we're kind of a hybrid of what we talked about. We use it all summer. It's just for us. It's 20 minutes door to door from our regular house, which works good for busy schedules for children. And then the other 9 months of the year, we rent it monthly. And so sometimes people stay the whole 9 months. Sometimes people rent it for 2 months or 3 months. And so we rent it as a furnished kind of midterm rental type option for people. And that allows us to own the home without paying the monthly bills. So that was really kind of what inspired me to share this with more people, is how do you tap into your equity, buy an amazing asset that's going to keep going up in value. Somebody else is paying down your, paying into your savings bank or paying down your mortgage. And it's something really great that allows you to create memories either for yourself or those around you. So, again, I just want to thank everybody for coming. I don't see that we had any questions typed in. You have all of our contact information, and thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming out. Matt, any last words?
Mute myself there. I share the sentiment. So thank you so much for joining us and listening to what we have to say here to help out with the investment slash second home. Again, any questions, to find out whether you qualify. Again, we can do this very, very easy, quick to run some different scenarios for your specific, how you kind of fall into these different scenarios, that is. So yeah, let us know.
Awesome. Thanks again, everybody.